Greetings! The Mega Matt Cat is here, taking a break from the Gundam Breaker uploads to bring you something a little different. It's been a while since I did a review, so I'm just going to go ahead and do one today. And I'm also going to be doing a Let's Play of this game that we're about to review here, the Mobile Suit Gundam Side Stories, so you can look into that down the road. But for now, it's review time of the most recent import in my collection. Let us get started, shall we? It is indeed time for the awesomeness that is the Mobile Suit Gundam Side Stories collection. Mobile Suit Gundam. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, and honestly, it's not a surprise if you aren't, it's not as big as, say, Naruto, One Piece, or Dragon Ball Z, but the Mobile Suit Gundam series has been a long-running series for almost 25 plus years now, and for the most part is a series about two things: awesome mechs and war. Now this game is a third-person mech combat game with lots of content, contains multiple games, and includes updated versions of PS2 games as well as a bonus in their collection. So that gives it more content than most games of its day. Now, the story and dialogue of this game are in Japanese, but the controls and gameplay info are actually in both Japanese and English, making it easy to pick up and play, and I'll give more details on that in the later sections. Suffice it to say, those with an understanding of Japanese will certainly get more out of it, but even casual Gundam fans or Gundam fans who don't speak Japanese will get a kick out of this because it is a great game. Now, on to that subject. We're going to be breaking this review up into a few different parts. Story, of course. Gotta get that out of the way, because what's a Gundam series without story? The graphics, the sound effects and music, the gameplay, and lastly, the features, and then finally the overall score. And that's going to be my overall score for the package as a whole, not just for an individual game. So yeah, we're going to have to get a look at this because it's well worth the time, but a little bit more detail wouldn't hurt. That being said, let us begin with the story. Now, the primary game takes place in UC-79 during the original animated series, but it takes place from the perspective of groups beyond the main characters. You're not Amuro and you're not Char. You're a group of pilots working either for Zeon, as in this case, or working for the Federation, as we'll see later. In both cases, you're part of a specialized group who has not only specialized missions, but are considered the better pilots of their particular divisions. In the case of the Zeon, it starts here with them guiding and guarding a colony that they're about to drop on the planet and devastate Australia with, which is what started the original animated series. So this game takes place both before, during, and after that as a sort of story about what happened around the main anime itself. So, that being said, we see here the Zeon forces, their elite troops. Now, we see the Federation group, and their story is different from what I can tell. They're both sort of like a special forces unit, but they're also charged with wiping out traitors, collaborators, and infiltrators. Such as that. So take that, tanks. Anyway, as the Federation, you'll go from place to place fighting down the Zeon and taking out traitors, wiping out anyone who stands in your way in the name of the Federation and trying to preserve peace. Whereas your Zeon opponents will fight for the rights of Zeon, just like in the original anime series, and you'll be able to see the story from both perspectives, which is a really neat thing. Gives you a lot more info, and if you know Japanese, it's actually really cool and really well written. Now that being said, there's more to the story than that, but I'll get into the features later. Next up is the graphics. A big part of any Gundam game is that you have to make the Gundams and the world itself look real. And one of the biggest problems with some games has been that always compromised the gameplay. Now, we'll get to the gameplay later, but the graphics in this game are very good. If a little bit simplistic for a PS3 game, but they do a very good job, particularly in the areas of the mobile suits themselves, which are exquisitely detailed and very, very well animated, but also in the special effects such as weapons fire, explosions, and just the sheer amount of crap that's on the screen at any given time. And believe me, there are times when there will be gunfire and explosions everywhere. So it can be a very, very dynamic and engaging game. That being said, there will be some things that look a little weird, like objects in the distance will have, a bad length of draw and all that stuff, but basically the graphics are functional, efficient, and perfect for what they're doing. But they're not going to beat out like The Last of Us or anything. Which, honestly, at this point, not much will. Still, as you can see, it looks great. Very, very pretty explosions, lots of neat gunfire. Always something happening, so there's never, a dull moment. I will say that there's some things about the game that could be better detailed, but for all intents and purposes, it's a Gundam game, it looks like a Gundam game, and it succeeds in making you believe the world. So that's good enough. It's not perfect by any means, but, it'll do the job, and it does it well. That's what matters. And, I'm not going to complain about something that looks good. Now, that being said, the sound is another matter. The music is very well done. The voice work is competent and effective and can be very well delivered. The weapons fire and audible sounds sometimes not as powerful as I'd like. For example, gunfire, explosions, they sound a little weak. Now, that being said, I'm all for the fact that most of the game seems to work, as a whole, and the sound, while not overwhelming, is more than efficient to get the job done. Again, I do think that an English release of this would be awesome, and I honestly think that would be a really good thing for them to do. I don't see it happening because this type of stuff is really much more of a Japan thing. As I said in my Gundam Breaker playthrough, Japan is huge into Gundam, and I don't think you'll see a US release of this game. It's fully compatible with PS3, so importing it is a perfectly viable option. Moving on. Now, next, the gameplay. A core part of any game is how well it plays. And in the past, the Gundam series has had a problem with balancing the visuals and the authenticity of the world with the gameplay itself. In this game, it is like perfect balance. In fact, aside from Gundam Breaker, and I love Gundam Breaker for different reasons, but this is the most playable, authentic experience as far as the Gundam universe is concerned. It feels right, it plays right, it handles right. There's no real hard complications with playing it. You take control of one of 3 Gundam units. Each team has 3 units at any time, and you can swap back and forth between them. Each unit has different powers and abilities. For example, some are faster and have better combat up close. Others are more balanced and have a good variety of weapons, while others bring the big punch, hitting you with heavy cannons and rocket launchers. And this actually applies both ways. Both groups have that ability. So the Zeons have the same deal. So right now I'm using a unit that has, for example, a rocket launcher and a machine gun. But there's another one that might have heavy axes, or might have, special machine cannons, or may have a bigger variety of equipment. But at the end of the day, it's all about, using the 3 units at your disposal to accomplish your missions. And unlike other games, for example, Crossfire and the 81st, which is actually one of the bonus games on this collection, but this game is far more balanced in its difficulty. It's challenging, but not overwhelming. Unlike Crossfire, which felt at times almost impossible, and unlike the 0081st, which was doable but had a bad difficulty curve near the end. This game feels just balanced enough to be a fun, entertaining game while still being a good challenge and giving fans of the Gundam series all the action they can handle. Overall, the gameplay controls are solid, responsive, and have very little issues. It takes a little getting used to switching from the ground levels to the space levels because the controls switch a little bit. But otherwise, the game controls beautifully, handles well, and feels great. Exactly what you want from a giant mech combat game. Now, features. This game is not just one game. There is the core game, which is the Missing Link. After all, this game is called Mobile Suit Gundam Side Stories Missing Link. Well, duh. But the Missing Link is one part of it. Granted, it's a big part of it. It has 2 different storylines and a variety of interesting environments and gameplay, but it's only part of it. There's a large collection of other games attached to it, including the Journey into Space PS2 game, the 81st, what I call the 0081st, which was another side story game that was created for the PS3 and has been re-released as part of this collection. And it's also, it features some other less-known games like Zeonic Front. So yes, there's a good amount of entertaining and interesting games, and there's plenty to work with here. You'll have lots of fun with this stuff. Like I said, there's plenty of other stuff included. There's the Blue Destiny, there's the Gundam Side Stories Space to the End of a Flash, Mobile Suit Gundam Zeonic Front, Lost War Chronicles, all kinds of interesting stuff here. Some of those were released in America under different names, but these basically feature a series of side story games repackaged, upgraded, and collected into a single game. And they're very, very, very good. Now, that being said, they're not without their faults. Not having an English translation means that anyone not fluent or at least relatively familiar with Japanese, you're going to miss out a bit on the story. You'll get the gist of it because there's not a whole lot of ambiguity with the Gundam series, but you're still dealing with a series where knowing what they're actually saying in detail helps clarify a lot of the questions. Now, the other fault I could lay at its feet is that you have to unlock the bonus games. You got to go through the Missing Link first before you can play anything else. Understandable, but still feels a little bit gypped that you buy a game with all this extra stuff, but you can't play it right away. Overall, minor gripes. I still feel the game is very good despite that. Now, the overall score. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty. You're looking at a game that has dozens of hours of gameplay just on the main game itself. But then you add bonus games and extra features, including a full gallery and lots of VR missions to test your mettle against. Yeah, you can definitely see a lot of replay value in this game. Granted, the game has its flaws. I do feel that some of the levels are a little bit too simplistic, and I feel that the game would have done better with a little bit more variety in the units themselves so far. But, by the same token, I feel that they streamlined it to the point where the game is just a blast to play without having to go through all the nitty-gritty and nitpicky problems that occurred in other games from the Side Stories generation. Fair's fair, and I'm not going to say that the game isn't worth your time or effort or money. It is a blast to play, and certainly I would say that there's plenty of other games out there, both Gundam and non-Gundam, that are far, far less entertaining. At the end of the day, I can say that I had a lot of fun with what I've played so far, and I'm still just chewing through it. But when you look at a game like Gundam, you want to feel as if you're commanding this big, powerful, super tough machine that can really wreck everything's shit. Pardon the language. And that's what you get with this game. You don't feel any type of, it doesn't feel too light or floaty like certain DW Gundam games do. It doesn't feel like you're this slow, plodding behemoth the way it did in Crossfire. It feels like you're this mobile, powerful battle machine. I've often made the comparison that one of the things that made the BattleTech series of games so interesting was the robots reflected what they were capable of. A light scout was fast and agile, but 2 or 3 good hits and it exploded. A heavy mech was slow and ponderous, but packed enough weaponry to devastate a city. The big thing about the Mobile Suit Gundam series is that even the low-grade robots are fairly agile for their size and pack some significant weaponry. And as time goes on, that weaponry got better and better, and the robots got more agile and more acrobatic. But at the end of the day, this game is a great game for Gundam fans, and might be a good game for action fans. I can't say it's for everybody, but I will say that if you can get a chance to play it, give it a try. You'll probably be surprised by how much fun it is. It takes a little getting used to navigate, and the knowledge of Japanese would definitely help. But at the end of the day, you're going to enjoy it if you're a Gundam fan. You may enjoy it if you're just an action fan. Overall, my final score is a 4 out of 5. 4 stars out of 5, baby. And I think that at the end of the day, when everything else is said and done, the game is worth a try just to see how well you do with piloting a giant mech. Either way, Mobile Suit Gundam Side Stories is worth the effort, worth the time, and probably going to wind up being one of my games of the year. Granted, I still have a lot of games to chew through, and there's some great content coming down the road on the next-gen systems, which I am going to start doing some recording on soon. But for the moment, the Mobile Suit Gundam Side Stories is worth a look, and I say give it a shot. This is the Mega Mad Cat, signing off. We'll see you with the next episode of Gundam Breaker and the future Let's Play of this game. See you then, folks.